This time very much so can, and I think should be, the darkest before the dawn. I want to take this as a call to action for one, but I also want to take this as a moment to really assess, analyze, and consider what the future can look like. To start taking initiative to build a plan. We have to take that initiative to build a plan. The progress that we want to make, it's not all going to happen at once. Given it's virtually impossible to make any major changes, sweeping reforms with any degree of swiftness. It's going to take time. Gradualism is the way. But for that very reason, that's why we have to push as far as we can in the right direction. Brick by brick and a stone by stone. It wasn't done alone. Spirit is the... Welcome. You are listening to Menstruction. I go by a black. Yo. What's good? Welcome to this show on the Black Velvet Radio program. I am your host, Black Velvet, the former host of the Menstruction podcast, but now we are here with the new and improved. Now, I sit here today relaunching this platform because, it seems like there are so many things that need to be discussed, so many things that are occurring in real time, so many things that are afflicting people that look like me, the skin folk, not necessarily the kin folk. And it bothers me. There's no way that you can sit back and continue to allow these things to occur, to hear them, to experience them in real time, and not get the coverage that they deserve, and more importantly, not engage in the conversations that need to happen. So here on this show, this is where nuance is going to meet culture. This is where we will unpack the issues that shape or seem to be shaping Black America today. And we'll challenge those narratives, the ones that attempt to define us. We'll do it live. It'll be raw. It will be informed. And this will always be a place where conversations that aren't had in the mainstream media for our communities. And part of me, I'm reading off of my notes because I want to make sure I get this right. We're going to get it together after some more runs. It's going to come way more naturally. But, as I like to say it, we got to talk it how we live it. Now, as we are, there are many things going on in the state of the nation at the moment. For those that are aware, for those who are not, currently going through the government shutdown as it has been transpiring, with the fight to reopen seeming to mainly hinge upon maintaining the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Now, one of the things that has to be addressed with that matter is just how many Black Americans are employed by the federal government. The federal government, as a matter of fact, is the largest employer of Black Americans. So you have to take into account and take into consideration just how much those things affect people that look like myself. You have to consider too the second and third order effects of that, the second and third order effects of taking actions like this for political movements to make some kind of political ideology and push that along, instead of doing what is to benefit the most people, what is to benefit the people that they're supposed to be representing. And so really where I want to base a lot of this conversation, starting off this first episode, this first show, is focusing on something that I have been really fascinated with and have been discussing a lot more recently ad nauseum, and a conversation that I had with a very good friend of mine not that long ago about really considering next steps in the directions that we go and we move and we pivot and we change as a country, given the position that we're in now. And specifically, those of us that look like myself, Black Americans, where we go moving forward. And a big part of that taken into account is, or a big part of that to take into account is asking that question and really truly reassessing that what has been truly a debate since our liberation from slavery. Is capitalism something that truly benefits us and our needs and our freedom, our liberation, and our equality? Or to oversimplify, if you truly are in the pro black camp and your goals and ideology and values align with pushing black progressivism and black liberation and equality, then can you also, in that same vein, be that pro capitalist? Because you really have to consider, again, looking at how things are going on and reflecting on the conversation that I had recently, systems fail. And when those systems fail that black Americans rely on, we are one of the first to then become scapegoats. We are one of the first to then be underserved. We are one of the first to then be considered the pariah, the issue, the blame for the economic downturns and decisions that we are in most instances disproportionately affected by. And so, in thinking of that and thinking of where things are right now, socially, culturally, politically, economically, there is a great opportunity to make great change and to make a great pivot in another direction. A direction that hinges more on populist ideals, a direction that encourages and can breed better social reforms and equality and more economic justice. We're in those times right now. But the crux of what's going to make the difference of that is who is going to take up that initiative and who's going to focus on making that pivot. There are enough of us, Black Americans, that are being affected. There are enough of us that have all kinds of challenges. And there are more than enough of us that have not only the willpower and the mental fortitude to get it done, but also increasingly so the resources. And so where I kind of want to start is aligning and assessing a lot of the analogs between where we are now currently and the things that we are facing socially, politically, and economically with instances in the past in American history. And then we're going to do a little bit of analysis. And I want to focus on possible outcomes and perspective changes that can be made moving forward if we seize this opportunity accordingly. So, what I did, I went into ChatGPT AI. Gotta use it. It's a great resource. And I provided the prompt. And I'll show that here. So I went for the prompt here. And so I was given these results. So starting with economic portions, the inflation, debt, and distrust. Today, inflation has cooled from its recent spike, but cost of living issues remain central. High federal debt and rising interest rates constrain options. Many Americans distrust institutions, government, media, and even elections. As we all can see across the board, there hasn't been a greater time where people are distrustful of everything in in the government institutions, right? And we really have to think about, you know, there's a Republican supermajority right now. The Republicans hold the presidency, the executive branch, they hold the legislative body in Congress, they hold the judiciary, and are for the most part heading up most executive agencies. So even their core group of supporters, right? Whether that be, you know, your far right conservatives and your MAGAs, or if you're even just talking about your run of the mill standard conservatives, there is definitely a revolt that's happening currently where even they do not trust and respect the decisions being made that are supposed to be made on their behalf. So when you've lost your own base, truly things have gotten to all-time highs of distrust and disdain for the system. This is in direct parallel to the 1970s with stagflation, oil shocks, and Watergate. The outcome, the parallel, economic frustration, as well as institutional distrust produced a political shift toward deregulation, tax cuts, and small government. The Reagan Revolution, which then ushered in the era of neoliberalism that we are still fighting against now. Possible today, another ideological pivot, either a swing back to populism or deeper entrenchment into deregulatory nationalist economics. So, taking into account what we know and what has already transpired historically with these things, this is high time where we can make that paradigm shift, where if the idea is to move in the direction of progress and to see things get better, if the idea is to take all of those frustrations of the economic variety, of the political variety, and to make some kind of strides in the right direction, this is a high time to do that. Now, is there enough support for that? Well, given the approval ratings of the current administration, given the disdain and distrust that we just discussed coming from the base of the Republican Party, it is very possible. Now, having an honest dialogue about what's transpiring and how it's affecting people on an individual level is what's going to bring everyone on the same page. Now, with the government shutdown that we opened with, that has most definitely, and I think is going to continue to sway a whole handful of people into moving towards populist ideals, whether that be on the populist left or the populist right. Because a large majority of the people who are affected directly by this shutdown, whether that be they are furloughed and not working due to not having their federal employment, or whether we're talking about state funded programs like the SNAP program, for example, the main proprietors and those that are affected are white Americans within red or more conservative states. If we're talking proportionally, they are affected the most. So when you have them who also primarily make up the base of the party and administration that's in charge, you have a hotbed of opportunity for change. Now, that depends on how the conversation goes and transpires with this moving forward. Now, obviously, there are a lot of other things going on, and we're going to get to the social parts in a second, into things like the extrajudicial deportations of American citizens, right? The blatant disregard for constitutional law, constitutional authority, federalism, so on and so forth. Those things are going to be a factor as well. But let's keep moving into some of the more social aspects. So today we have that let's try it again. Today we have that wealth inequality near historic highs. Populist leaders on both sides of the spectrum question globalization, Wall Street, and traditional elites. This is in a direct analog to the 1930s, Great Depression, which fueled populist critiques of capitalism and experiments in social/economic reform. So this is, height of FDR. That's where you see that New Deal era. That's where you see new social reforms coming in. That's where you see things like Social Security being put into place, and a lot of those three-letter agencies getting their inception, right? To even out a lot of the social and economic burdens that were being experienced through the Great Depression. As it says right there with the parallel, reshapes the social contract. So what could happen today? A resurgence of large-scale government programs like that to stabilize things and to re-implement some order, or we sink deeper into polarization if that consensus collapses. Now, one of the next points we're going to get into as well that I think is a major significant factor in that is that consensus of the populace. And one of the major factors, if not the primary factor, that is driving this polarization between the left and the right is the media representation of these issues, of the bread and butter issues, as we like to call them, that are affecting American citizens. If those things are not discussed in an honest and earnest way, and if they're not presented not only from a as objective of a perspective as possible, but also really truly discussing how people are being affected directly by those things, then the polarization will continue. The conversation has to be had and things have to be aligned as we are discussing here. This affects everyone uniformly. The same struggle that you're feeling at home, the same way that you're worried about putting that food on your table, being able to cover those bills, having to make that decision between paying for rent and lights or paying for groceries, that struggle is the same for the people that don't necessarily look like you and who don't necessarily have your same political views. It's the same. But if that isn't presented that way, if there are scapegoats provided, if there are if finger pointing is done, if there's the continuation of the otherism, having to find a human flesh breathing scapegoat instead of what really should be the case, which is being upset at the institution, right? One great philosophy that I live by and that more people should is don't be upset with the person, be upset with the system. Take your aim and anger at the institution. They're not doing that. The mainstream media is not doing that. And with mainstream media corporations conglomerating right now, that is only going to be a greater concern, which is something we're going to get to next in regards to the technological aspect of that and how that affects the social influences and that social engineering into not truly addressing the root of these issues. So, as I was just saying, today we have AI, we have automation, you have digital platforms that disrupt the labor market. And that is also another portion to take into consideration. Automation, right? Which is also leading to a lot of jobs being lost by people don't necessarily who weren't necessarily middle class in the first place, or who didn't exactly have the highest paying jobs in the first place, but they had enough that they were getting by. But the thing with their jobs that in some cases require more rudimentary skill sets is that you can train machine machine learning technology to do those jobs. And that has been the case. And so now, with that automation coming in, with the AI coming in, which is ironic because that's what we're using right now to help align these ideals, these kinds of things also lead to that polarization because people are always going to feel some type of way when they don't feel economically stable. I am a firm believer that most, if not all, issues that happen between persons to persons as American citizens is rooted in economics. It's like a, what is that, the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing? If you provide to me an issue, a significant issue that Americans are having on a person to person level, I guarantee you I can walk it back to economic disparity or economic insufficiency every time. The loneliness epidemic, that goes back to economics. The political polarization directly tied to economics. The extrajudicial deportation of American citizens goes back to economics. So if you take into consideration, now you have these technological advancements that are moving way faster than our systems, our regulatory systems as people, as governments, as societies. It's moving way faster to the point where our minds aren't even able to comprehend a lot of what's happening in real time. We all, on some level, understand the detriment that social media has done and continues to do to our mental state. AI is the next step in that evolution. And so then when it gets into the labor market, now that's where it's really hitting people at home, so to speak. That's where people are really feeling it. So the analog there is the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution. Railroads, industrialization, and displaced workers, immigration surge, and monopolies concentrated wealth. You had those railroad tycoons. So the parallel of the outcome, possible outcome, is progressive reforms that broke up those monopolies, the trust busting, expanding democracy, and restructuring labor rights. Now, this is the part of this portion of the analysis that I think is most important. Possible today. Regulation of tech giants, new labor practices for the AI economy, and stronger antitrust enforcement. Again, going back to what we were discussing before. If the right people who have the power and influence do not take the initiative to make these changes at this pivotal moment, then we only sink deeper into that division and that polarization. Regulation in this case is necessary. It just is. However you feel fiscally about the economy and the government's involvement in it or lack thereof, if we look at it from a human perspective, if we look at it from a person to person perspective, there's no way that anyone should truly be able to argue in good faith that we as a people, as a society, are developing and moving on track with how fast these technological advancements are. With automation, with the gig economy, with AI, it's moving so fast that we're trying to use it to supplement what we are lacking from our interpersonal connections. Which means as people on a person-to-person level, we haven't even gotten to the point where we can solve those issues there. How could we believe that we're going to be able to solve those issues with technology that we don't even fully understand? And then to let it run rampant and not be regulated, to let it get to a point where it is strictly for profit, regardless of the impact that it may or may not have, the long-lasting impact that it may have on not just our minds, our interactions with each other, our social fabric, but we also have to take into account the environmental concerns, because these AI servers and systems take a lot of energy. There's a lot of computing power that goes into that. So they have to build these big power plants to do that, of which they are currently working on building more. But it has already been reported on that these power plants get built in these towns, in these spaces, and the people that live locally then start to suffer. Their health starts to suffer. There's pollution. And let's take it here. Let's bring it back to the economic angle. With those stations being built in, again, little cities or towns, or whether they be major cities or towns, but built in the backyard, literally in the backyards of American citizens, all of that energy that's required to run these plants is energy that's can't be utilized by the citizens. So what happens? You have a steady supply of electricity, but now you have an increased demand. What happens in that instance? Prices go up, and it's already happening. It's already happening in those areas, and it's going to happen and continue to proliferate across the country. Electricity prices are going to go through the roof. They're already increasing. This is combined with the increases in grocery items, the increases in consumer goods, the increases in insurance premiums, which is effectively the major issue that the shutdown seems to be pivoting upon right now. So you have all of these increases in expenses, and people are suffering on both sides of the spectrum. Whether you're left, right, or center, it affects you the same. You like to have lights and electricity and internet in your home the same way an alt-right conservative does. You want to be able to have sufficient health care just like your progressive lefty neighbors do. But those things are not being effectively covered because they're not being regulated. The institutions and processes that are supposed to act as buffers so that these things don't get out of hand, they're not happening. So let's go back to our analysis. The political polarization, as again, we were just discussing, you have partisan divides, questions of loyalty and disinformation, which is directly fueled by those same media companies who are taking out of your pocket directly by propping up and, in a lot of cases, investing in these very AI automated firms that, as we just discussed, are increasing your electricity prices and damaging your health. And the polarization on national security happened in the 50s. McCarthyism, the blacklist, and the deep political suspicion divided America. Parallel of outcome, tensions cooled as prosperity spread, meaning the economy improved. So people calmed the fuck down a little bit. Because when you're not worried about if you're going to be able to put food on your table, when you're not worried about being able to pay those insurance premiums, when you're not worried about being able to send your children to school, childcare, college, whatever that may look like, when interest rates don't seem to be blowing your head off, you don't have all that anxiety. You're not trying to attack your fellow American. You don't need to point the finger and place blame. But that's not to say that the divisions go away. As the next portion says, unresolved divisions later exploded in the 60s, which led to the civil rights movement and all the countercultures that came subsequently. And this is where it really all synthesizes. What's possible today? The polarization burns out as economic or social stability returns, which it may, which it can, but it will not just happen naturally. There has to be some intervention, or the unresolved tensions will erupt into deeper division into the coming decade. So this goes back to my central point that now is the time. Now is the time to get engaged. Now is the time to really take up some initiative. And I'm speaking very directly to the younger side of the voting populace, especially those that look like me. Now is the time. As it may seem that this is very much so the time to not be engaged due to how things are going and the domino effect that it seems to be, and the continued propagated belief that your vote doesn't matter or your voice doesn't matter and you're not being heard, I implore you to consider otherwise. This is a time where we can very much so affect an inflection point. It has already been determined and expressed that those of the other generation, of the older generations, they're just not there. They're not going to make those changes. They don't understand, and in a lot of cases, they don't care. They are the ones that ushered us into the position that we're in now. But we are armed with so much more information. We are armed with so much more anguish and anxiety. And if we take that and we channel it effectively into strategic reform, into strategic coalitions and collectives, we can make that change that they failed to do for us and in a lot of cases for themselves. This time very much so can, and I think should be, the darkest before the dawn. Things are bad, and I do believe they're going to continue to get a bit worse. However, we are approaching multiple election years. We have a swath of elections coming in a couple weeks. Next year in 2026, and then subsequently the general elections and more local elections in 2028. Going into this next decade, into the 30s, 2030s, we have the ability and opportunity to, again, as we were acknowledging these analogs historically, we have this opportunity to have an analog of success, of progressivism, of reform, of social panacea. There's a possibility. It's there. We have the historical examples and we know what's required. But what it's going to take is the right people, the right forces to take that initiative. That's us. That's people that look like me. That's people of my shade and darker. That's people who find themselves to be part of minority groups. And I would go as far to say the young adult voting public is a minority group in and of itself, because most of us do not vote. So I want to take this as a call to action for one, but I also want to take this as a moment to really assess, analyze, and consider what the future can look like. To start taking initiative to build a plan. We have to take that initiative to build a plan. Because the reality is, the progress that we want to make, it's not all going to happen at once. Given our our system of government and the foundations of which it was built upon, it's virtually impossible to make any major changes, sweeping reforms with any degree of swiftness. It's going to take time. Gradualism is the way. But for that very reason, that's why we have to push as far as we can in the right direction, because there's going to be just as much pushback. But it's better to pitch and propose 15 items and get 7 than it is to propose 3 and only get 1. So we have to be willing to push. We have to be willing to take that initiative, and we have to be willing to have that hope. And even if you don't have the hope, that's fine. Take that spite, take that disdain, take that disillusionment, and turn that into purpose. It can be done. We have the understanding, we have all of the examples. We are seeing institutions and systems fail us in real time. So we know what the outcomes are going to be, and we know how we got here. And we also know what happens when enough of the right steps transpire in the right order for us to end up where we are. We know that. We have that information. So again, I want this to be a call to action for one, but I also want it to be a forewarning of what can come, not based off of projection, not based off of some idealism that I have. As we just covered, we went through the historical analogs. We've been here before, not us specifically, but historically, as Americans, we've been here before. So this is the opportunity for us to make our historical change and to have our era of reform, to have our eras of populism and progressive changes. This is our opportunity, and bringing it back to addressing the Black folk in this conversation. All of these systems are built off of polarization, are built off of sowing inequality, which usually results in the subjugation of Black, brown, minority American. There's no reason that we cannot use this time to infuse some of our needs and the changes that we deserve in this time. We have to take those things into consideration. There have been a lot of fights for things to protect these very institutions and systems. And it's sad to me because there are still some people that are coming out and defending some of these systems and institutions as if they do not disproportionately affect those same people. Just based off of what you look like, a phenotype. We're armed with that information. And so if you have that, you should know better. But even for those of you that don't, or don't believe it, or have your own agenda, whatever that may be, I still care about you too. I'm still extending this call of action to you too, because I still want you to be able to pay your bills, to pay your insurance premium, to eat good food, and be sustained and nourished in your spirit, to be able to blow off some steam and watch your favorite internet content because you can afford electricity and internet for that matter, and a home to stay in. So even for you, this call of action is extended to you, because the reality of the matter is, no matter where you stand on this political spectrum, whatever side of the polarization you choose to be on, if you look like me, if you are of darker skin, if you are perceived to be part of a minority group, you will be cast aside when things go sideways. That is the reality of the situation. You will be the fall guys and fall gals. So again, if even on a fiscal and political level you don't necessarily agree, think about it on a human level, on a person to person level, on a personal general welfare level. You should still have a horse in this race. You should still want to be part of the collective and join the fight and be part of the initiative to make this pivot, to push off in this direction that we need to push off into. And we need to do it now because the time is quickly approaching. And if the forces that be, the forces that currently are setting the agendas, are allowed to continue, then they will determine what that shift looks like. And they will determine what this next phase looks like. And they will determine what this next decade looks like, and decades to follow. Decades that people like myself and those that I am extending this call of action to will then have to grow up into. Those will then be our quote unquote golden years. I don't know about you all, but I personally do not want to spend some of the best, what are supposed to be the best years of my life living through times like that, especially when we had the opportunity to change it, especially when we had a ripe environment set upon us. Take that initiative. It will not sit right with me, and it shouldn't sit right with any of you. And at that point, you cannot point fingers. You cannot place blame on others. You have to look in that mirror and face yourself. Because the question you will have to ask yourself is, what did you do? What action did you take? What initiative did you make to prevent that from happening? You can't fall back on that excuse of, oh, well, I voted in the general. That's great. But as you can see right now, who are the people that are having the most direct changes on your day-to-day life? It's not the president. It's not. The president doesn't even know if he's coming or going right now. He's hanging on to the precipice of life by a fingernail. It's not him. It's your representatives. It's Congress. It's your senators. It's your representatives, your state representatives. It's your local municipalities, your city councils, your state legislatures. Look at what's going on in Louisiana right now with the maps being redrawn, the congressional maps, because they're gearing up for this election that's coming up next year, the local election, which will determine of their representatives who's going to Congress to represent them, but also to affect the agendas for Americans as a whole. They are planning because they are also aware of this time that is coming for this pivotal change. They're gearing up to push it in the direction that they want to push it in, which is very much so going to be a regressive one. They have the foresight. They have the resources. They have the ability. There's another tenet in life that I live by that's always been true as far as I've known. You only need two real things to do anything in life. You need the willingness and the ability. They have demonstrated, Republicans have demonstrated, they have the willingness. All they needed was the ability. They didn't have that en masse because on average, their policy proposals are unpopular. On average, the things that they stand for are usually in the realm of hypocrisy and do not benefit the wide majority of American citizens, even those that say they fall within their ranks. They've pieced all of that together. Now they have found themselves in a unique position where they have the willingness and the ability. And look what's being done. And look how quickly it's happening. We are now approaching a time and a situation and a position where those of us, again, those that I'm speaking to directly, those of us that are part of the young adult voting electorate, we are quickly approaching, we're already there, finding ourselves in a position where we too will have a very unique ability to have the willingness, with a very unique ability to affect changes of the same or similar scale and on a similar timeline. But if we are not willing, if we are not going to provide that willingness, we're going to lose that opportunity. And the people who want it more, the people who are more willing, as again, we have already determined, they have shown they have the willingness and they have the ability. The only way to combat that is to have more of both. You have to be more willing, you gotta be more able, you gotta fight. This is the time for that fight. And this is the form in which I propose that we take that fight. The answer is to go to the extreme. What do I mean by that? Let's keep it very clear and very much so in perspective. Again, as we went through before with the historical analogs, when I say extreme, I'm not talking about fundamental extremism. We're not talking about communism to combat the fascism that we're living through right now. That's not what I mean. When I say extreme, I mean we have a status quo of what is expected and what the general American populace is in favor of. We need to go further than that to combat what's already occurring. The concept of the Overton window, it's shifting and has shifted rightward. If we want to get just back to, again, this is what I was saying before about the gradualism and how these major changes don't just happen all at once. Those reforms, the populist ideals that then do eventually benefit majority of Americans, those things don't happen in a sweeping nature. It takes time. So I'm saying just to get us back, just to get to a point where we're in line with the general desires and needs of the American populace at large, we have to go that much further just to get back to baseline. And even that isn't sufficient. If you ask me, we need to go further than that. We need to push past baseline. But just to get to baseline at this point, we have to go extreme. Because on the other side, with those that are in charge now, they're on that extreme and they're dragging that window in that direction. So this is prime time. Things that may have sounded so extreme 10 years ago, now is the time to start proposing those things. Now is the time to start pushing and fighting for those things. You want reparations? Push for those reparations. Because what was previously seen as extreme is now just going to be seen as baseline. Universal basic income. They laughed. They clowned Andrew Yang when he proposed that. Boy, I don't know if that had been implemented. I don't know how many people would be laughing now. I think they'd be nothing but grateful considering the position that majority of Americans are in right now. You see candidates like Zoran Mamdani making his meteoric rise by proposing policies that, again, a decade ago would have been seen as pretty extreme. And even still, the media tries to paint as extreme policies. But the majority of the American populace, and especially those in New York, just see that as basic. That's what they need to survive. A rent freeze, state-owned grocery stores. You just need those things to be able to survive now. Not even to make greater changes and reform, just to get back to baseline to survive. So again, my proposal stands. This is that time. If you have a true populist proposal, something that seems a bit extreme and progressive in the right way, for the benefit of more than just your central group, for the majority, for the greater good, now is the time to go on that crusade. Now is the time to take that initiative. The field is open. The window has already shifted. Now is that time. If you choose not to engage, if you choose not to be part of the movement, if you choose not to take that initiative, if you choose not to use your voice, then whatever consequences occur, you are complicit in. And if things do not go in the direction that you want, it's going to be very hard pressed to hear any of your complaints. So that is my proposal. That is my thesis. That is my stance. And it's not to worry. That's why I'm doing this show, so we can continue to engage in these conversations. This is the contribution that I'm going to make. This is me getting into the fight, as many others need to. This is a call to action, not just for those that I'm speaking directly to, but it's a call to action for myself. This is the general landscape that we're living in right now. But if you're not going to do it, if you're not going to see it, now is not the time for apathy and indifference. It just is not. Now is the time for activism. Now is the time for populism. Now is the time for ardent demands. It was somewhat encouraging to see things like the No Kings protests take place and so many people get involved nationally. But where it was a little disappointing is there were no demands. This is the time to make demands. This is the time to take initiative and push for it all. As I said before, it's better to make 15 proposals and get 8 than it is to make 3 and only get 1. This is that time. This is where we have that opportunity. I want to thank you for tuning in. If you were here with us live, or if you're catching this on the rerun, I go by Black Velvet. This is my show, my program, and I'm going to be here. Because as I said at the top, we speak it how we live it. We have to. And I'm sick and tired of people speaking it and not living it. Or people who live it and just don't get heard. This is it. This is it, baby. We bring in nuance to culture. We're doing it. There's no need to let the status quo. There's no need to let the establishment. There's no need to let the mainstream media dictate the issues that are going to shape Black America. We can speak up for ourselves. We have opinions. We have ideas. We have to use them. And I see no greater time than right now, to be as expressive as we so please. There is no greater time to be as damn expressive as you want to be. Speak out and speak up. Now is that time. When will an opportunity like this again present itself? In our lifetime? I don't know, but I do know that if we do not take that initiative and we don't start making those strides now, we may never get the opportunity again. By letting the wrong people and the wrong forces seize it. Food for thought. This has been great. It's been fantastic getting back on the horn, as they used to say, and getting back into the recording space. Let's give a round of applause for courage. So, for everyone that's watching, again, I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for listening. And I hope that I inspired you to either take action or to think a little bit more about the situations presented upon us. And don't worry, I'm here. I will be back. This is only the beginning. So if you enjoyed, go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, follow, share, all that good stuff on all the platforms. And I'm gonna see y'all next time. When, I can't say. As of right now, we don't have a set schedule just yet, but we're gonna be here. And we'll get it figured out. As it says in the thumbnail, weekdays whenever we're ready. So let's get ready, Let's get ready. I love each and every one of you. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your people. Take care of your institution. And remember, here, we gotta speak it how we live it. I'm out of here.